Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Point differential. I promise you, I think it's an important stat in the NFL, but I've never heard it at the forefront of every conversation that I hear nationally, regionally, than I have this year. And I think it's all specific to one team, most definitely, but I haven't heard it that way. So we're going to talk about it in first down. And we're going to go into great detail. I'm going to tell you it's not as important as everybody's trying to make it. All right, in second down, I've got your social media questions as always. I love hearing from you. I want to know what it is that you want to talk about when it comes to the landscape of college football and the NFL. So we'll hit your social media questions on second down. And in my nonsense narrative, the college football playoff has a lot of people upset. And the argument I always hear from coaches, from pundits, from fans alike is it's about the best teams. It's not about the most deserving. That's the assumption that those teams aren't one and the same. So I'll definitely tell you why I feel like that narrative is nonsense during my favorite segment of the show. And finally, hey, the Big Ten is a very good conference, but it's top heavy. Doesn't mean it's the best. It means it's top heavy. All that and more right here on Move the Chains, but you know what time it is. Let's kick it off with first down. All right, so let's talk about this point differential. For those of you that love football like I do, and you may not have heard the term point differential before, let me break it down real quick. Point differential simply means the difference between the points that you've scored and the points that you've given up in terms of the opponents that you've played. Now, by me saying that, you may think that point differential automatically equates to record, right? Whoever has the best point differential has the best record. But it's not always the case. So I've got a graphic I want to show you. Let's throw it up here, Ernest. I appreciate it. So let's look at the point differential as it stands right now in the 2024 NFL season. Now, a lot of times, point differential does tell you a great story. You can see the Lions have a 177 point differential right now, the highest in the league, and they're currently 10-1. That's absolutely important for the Lions, and they've been dragging people this year. Two opponents, but that weren't that good, and they've done what they needed to do. The Bills, 9-2 record as well. If you look at this, the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Ravens, all five of these teams that have the top 5 point differential all have at least 8 wins that are currently in the playoffs. So, yes, it matters. And every point differential story as we go to the next 6 through 11, I want you guys to understand something that the great thing about football, and as we look at the Chargers, the Steelers, the Packers, the Broncos, the Ravens, and the Chiefs round out the top 11. Now, it's very important of why I wanted to have the Chiefs there at number 11. So let's come back to me right here, Ernest. I appreciate that. All right, so the Chiefs are at number 11, and the Chiefs are a one-loss team before this stat came out. And I want you to understand something. Every game when it comes to the NFL has a story. And the reason that's important is because every game when it comes to turnovers, when it comes to point differential, when it comes to third down percentage, when it comes to red zone percentage, scoring and touchdowns, all of these small things in a game tell a story. Now, the question you want to ask yourself when you're watching a team and you're watching teams throughout the duration of the NFL season is, are these teams telling me a story that I can rely on at the end of the season? And when it comes to Kansas City, this was a team that before they lost to Buffalo had won, I think, 13 or 14 games in a row, back-to-back Super Bowl champions. And everybody seems to point to their point differential and say, well, they're barely beating teams. They're not blowing anybody out. Rex Ryan, who is somebody that I listen to and, I think does a good job, he said that the Chiefs were not what their record says they are. And I'll touch on that a little bit later because their point differential is so bad. And he went back to talking about the Minnesota Vikings 2 years ago, how their point differential wasn't that great, and they ended up getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Vikings also had literally the worst defense in the NFL, ranked 32nd. But if you're trying to make that point, I get it. But you know me, somebody who loves a debate. If you've got a point, I've got a counterpoint. Because I think that if you win close games consistently, it's a skill set. It's about situational football. It's about understanding that each matchup you have is a different fight. And some fights take different styles. You might win one way in week 3, and you might win a totally different way in week 6. That's what made the Patriots so great under Bill Belichick when Tom Brady was the quarterback. They were chameleons. They can win in a multitude of ways. And 7 of the last 8 Kansas City Chiefs playoff wins that have led to back-to-back Super Bowls and 3 in the last 5 were by 7 points or less. So it seems like this team has a skill. But I know there are still some detractors out there. There's still a lot of you saying, well, Bam, I don't care. The Chiefs, we're not used to seeing the Chiefs look like they used to look. And again, this is people comparing the Chiefs of a year or 2 ago or even 3 years ago to the season now. And they'll say they're not that good. Their defense is good. They're top 5, but their offense doesn't have any explosive plays. They can't do anything. Doesn't matter that the Chiefs are number 1 in time of possession, one of the best third down teams in football, one of the best red zone touchdown percentage teams in football. So I'm going to use your point differential stat to prove my point. Let me get this last graphic, Ernest. I'm going to love this. I want you to look at last year's top 5 teams in point differential. The Ravens were 13-4 at number 1. The Cowboys were 12-5 at number 2, followed by the 49ers, the Bills, and the Dolphins. All of these teams made the playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to talk about those same Kansas City Chiefs. They had a point differential of 77. Now, why did I bring this up? Why does point differential from 2023 matter? Well, I'm going to tell you why it matters. That team that was at number 5 with a 105-point differential, who made it to the first round in the playoffs, do you know who they lost to? The Kansas City Chiefs. That number 4 team, the Buffalo Bills, led by Josh Allen last year and Stephon Diggs, and a very explosive team, had a 140-point differential. You know who beat them at home last year? The Kansas City Chiefs. The San Francisco 49ers, who have been one of the best teams in football under Kyle Shanahan, who have been to multiple Super Bowls, 3 or 4 NFC championship games in his span as head coach. Phenomenal organization. Had a 193-point differential in 2023. Do you know who beat them in the Super Bowl? The Kansas City Chiefs. And last but not least, the Baltimore Ravens. MVP Lamar Jackson, whom I continue to say is one of only 2 elite quarterbacks in the NFL, along with Patrick Mahomes, they had a 203-point differential. The Baltimore Ravens had the number 1 scoring offense and the number 1 scoring defense in 2023, which is why their point differential was so phenomenal. And they lost in the AFC Championship game at home. And you know who beat them? The Kansas City Chiefs. So all I'm telling you is point differential matters, but I think when you have a team that's won so much like the Chiefs, they become a prisoner of their own success because people not only want them to win, they want them to win a certain way. The last 5 years, the team that's had the best point differential throughout the duration of the season has not won the Super Bowl. So I'll just tell you, point differential matters, but it's not the end-all be-all when it comes to being a champion. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be your questions via social media. We'll be back and we'll move the chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. And before I get to your social media questions on Second Down, as always, I want to take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for the opportunity to host Move the Chains. It's a blessing. I love what I do, and it's what I'm purposed to do. Secondly, I want to thank you, the fans. Like, none of this works without you. So the fact that you watch, the fact that you comment every time you see me, and tell me that the show is going great and you're praying for my success is truly appreciated. It means a lot. And last but always not least, man, the production crew. So you know we just passed the Thanksgiving holiday. We're still in the holiday, but you got a production crew that is taking time away from their family to make sure that this show runs smoothly. And that can't go underappreciated. So I definitely want to thank the best production crew in the business for making sure that this show runs the way that it needs to. All right, having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for Second Down. All right, it's time for your social media questions. I love hearing what you listen, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, you leaving stuff in the comment section about the show. I love it. Even if you disagree with a take that I have, I appreciate it, especially if you come to me with substance. I appreciate that even more. All right, so let's see what we have first. Have the Texans underachieved so far in 2024? Listen, I don't think Houston has underachieved. So, you know, when I went to college and I graduated from high school, graduated with almost a 4.0 GPA and went to college to play ball for a little bit, I struggled my initial semester in college, and it wasn't because I couldn't do the work. It was because I thought the work would be the same that it was my last year in high school. That was naive, but I understood that just because I performed at a certain level the previous year, I thought I was going to perform at that same level the next year. So expectations were the key there. I think it's the same thing with people in the Houston Texans. If you remember before the season, I said that this team is not a championship caliber team yet. I said that because I thought people were overinflating, I think, their expectations for the Texans moving into this season because you have a brand new head coach, D'Amico Ryans, last year in his first season, who's phenomenal. He's been phenomenal as a defensive coordinator, and I think he's very good as a head coach from situationally to understanding how to make sure his defense is prepared, to make sure that he and his quarterback on the same page, even though he's not a quote-unquote offensive mind. He's a guy that knows how to coach men and develop a culture. And C.J. Stroud, who was phenomenal as a rookie last year, and I told you he was phenomenal because he wasn't turning the ball over that much. It's not like he threw for 40 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, but he was good with the football. And I said I think that would look a little different this year, and he has thrown the same amount of interceptions already this year than he did all of last year. Now, his offensive line hasn't been great, and he hasn't played with Nico Collins the entire year and lost Stephon Diggs for the year. I didn't predict those things, but I'm telling you there's always a hiccup when it comes to you growing. The same way that people have growing pains, so do the Houston Texans and any other young team. They are first in their division, and they are good, and they have a lot to work on. So I don't think they've underachieved because, in my estimation, they are where I thought they should be, competing for a division title and can win another playoff game this year. But I don't think they're championship contenders just yet, but I think they will be in the near future. All right, what's the next question I have? What sub-500 team can make a playoff run in the NFL? You've already seen I've got the Tampa Bay logo right here. Now, this is a team that right now, after having beat the Giants this past weekend, they're 5-6. And I already told you, they're 5-6 for a reason. But I want to look at the games that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have played this year. Now, I told you a month or so ago that I thought the Falcons would win the NFC South, and I'm sticking by that. So if the Bucs do make the playoffs, it'll have to be via the wild card. But let's look at the teams they've played so far this year. They've played the Commanders, the Eagles, and the Lions, all of whom they've beaten. I don't think a lot of people know that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have beaten the Commanders, the Lions, and the Eagles. They've also played the Chiefs, the 49ers, and they've also played the Broncos. They've lost to the Falcons twice. 8 games that the Bucs have played this year have been against teams that are currently in the playoffs. 8. So the fact that they had their bye, they've gotten a little bit healthier now. Mike Evans is back. Their offense has been a top 7, top 8 offense all year long, and their run defense is not terrible. They're good. They have to work on their pass defense. But in their last 6 games, they've got teams like the Carolina Panthers twice. They've got to play the Saints one more time, who they blew out in New Orleans. They've also got the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know the Bucs are going to win all these games. I think they can. They only have one team in that last stretch of games that has a winning record, and that's the Chargers. And I think the Chargers haven't beaten a team with a winning record this year either. So if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're in prime position because you've gotten through the very tough part of your schedule, which we've seen it play out this year. Now you've got an opportunity to make hay. You do have a small margin of error, and it may not be doable, but I think if any team can do it who's sub-500 right now and make the playoffs, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right, what's my last question? Are teams what their record says they are? 100%, absolutely. You are what your record says you are, and it can be for a multitude of reasons. Hey, did you guys watch the Bears and the Lions on Thanksgiving? Did you watch the Bears self-destruct in that last drive when it came to clock management and understanding how to stay poised in that game? And a lot of people say, well, man, Detroit didn't win that game. The Bears lost it. Detroit won the game because they didn't beat themselves. See, I tell my players and I tell my sons all the time, if you ever coach, the one thing you need to realize is that you always want to make it as hard as possible for your opponent to beat you. And when you're bad in clock management, you're bad in situational football, you make it easy for teams to beat you. But you may be what your record says you are because of injuries. You may be what your record says you are because you got a young quarterback. You may be what your record says you are because your defense is 25th in the league, but your offense is first overall. You may be what your record says you are because you have the best player on the planet who can cover up deficiencies. I don't care the circumstances. Everybody has a story. But yes, you are what your record says you are, and it's for a multitude of reasons, and generally none of them are the same for any team. All right, when we come back from the break, it's my favorite segment of the show. You don't want to miss it. Back when we'll move the chains right after this. Hey, welcome back in. It's my favorite time of the show right now. So let's not delay it, man. It's time for the nonsense narrative. All right, so throw up my lower third, and we're going to have some video for you as well, because I think this is very imperative here. College football playoff conversation always involves this. The best teams don't mean the most deserving. So the reason I think this is a nonsense narrative is because people assume that this conversation is mutually exclusive. You can either be a team that's the best team or you can be the most deserving. And generally they associate the most deserving with teams that win a lot of games but don't play a tough schedule. I want to show you some of this video from Alabama, Oklahoma last weekend. And Alabama's a 3-loss team, right? They've got the Iron Bowl later today. But they're a 3-loss team. They've lost all 3 games on the road. They lost to Vanderbilt, Tennessee, and they lost to Oklahoma. And if somebody asks me, hey, are they a playoff team? Well, they're one of the best teams, man. They've got all this talent. They do. And I'm somebody that said they'd be a national championship contender this year, and we'll see how it shakes out towards the end of the season, especially if they can win in the Iron Bowl and finish 9-3. But ladies and gentlemen, please listen to me. Just because a team is most deserving, it doesn't insinuate that they're not one of the best teams. And just because they're just one of the best teams doesn't insinuate that they're not most deserving. Stop trying to separate the two. And we do it because of conference schedule strength. I get it. You're not going to convince me that the schedule in the Big Ten is the same as the schedule in the SEC. You're not going to. But you're also not going to convince me that there are teams who don't play as tough a schedule as they do in the SEC that can still be as good, if not better. Both can be true. So if you're a squad like Alabama, you can have 3 losses. I get it. Vanderbilt, Tennessee on the road, in Oklahoma, those are tough. Anybody can go in and lose those games. But what if you win one of those 3 games that you lost? Now we're potentially not having this conversation. So the whole point of being one of the best teams is, yes, you can be talented, but you also have to be good on the field as often as possible. And no team is generally going to be their best version of themselves every week. But remember, the best teams find a way to win even in the midst of adversity. Now, adversity is higher for some teams based on their schedule than it is for other teams. But the best team doesn't mean you're the most talented. I want people to stop coming at me and trying to say just because they have the best talent, and even though they have 4 or 5 losses, hey, they're the best team still. It's about the best team, not the most deserving. It should be a combination of both, because typically the best teams will prove that they're also the most deserving. All right, when we come back from the break, the last segment of the show. Back with the final segment of Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains, and it's the final segment of the show, so you know what that means. It's time for the final drive. The Big Ten is top heavy. I don't know what else you want me to say. And this is not me putting any type of negative spin on the Big Ten. I think they're a phenomenal conference. I just know there's a lot of conversation about who's better, the Big Ten or the SEC, and the Big Ten has 4 teams in the top 11 or 10 now, and the SEC has 8 teams in the top 25. So the SEC undoubtedly is the deeper conference, and the Big Ten's top 4 are good teams. And I think you can easily say that they can win a national championship if they make the playoff. So don't think that the Big Ten, in my estimation, is better because they have the top 4 teams where they're ranked. I just think their top 4 teams can typically compete with any other conference or any other team in the country. But when you're looking at the SEC that is 8 deep in the top 25, that means something a little bit more. All right, don't forget, you can not only catch us right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can watch Move the Chains on YouTube as well. Subscribe to the channel. Go to YouTube, and it's at @move_the_chains. Make sure you leave a comment, subscribe, like, talk to us all day long. We love it. All right, for the best production crew in the business, as always, it's been another banger. It's your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers, and until next time here on Move the Chains, God bless.